Hey, it's me. Welcome to the Paul Leslie Hour. We're joined by pianist, conductor, musical director, producer, and composer Frank Owens. He's recorded and performed with Johnny Mathis, Lena Horne, Chubby Checker, Barbara McNair, Petula Clark, Bob Dylan. We could keep on going. Frank Owens was also the first musical director for David Letterman's first television show, which was on in the morning, called The David Letterman Show. Lots and lots of stories here. So thanks so much to Frank Owens for joining us. So, Frank, tell us, where were you born?
Actually, I was born in Poughkeepsie, New York. My mother, she did not raise me. My foster mother raised me from 3 months old. And I grew up in Harlem on 129th Street. And she was a domestic, my foster mother was. My biological mother, in fact, in those days I used to say my real mother, but I don't think I knew the word biological. But she wasn't able to raise me or to keep me. But I did know who she was. She would come by and visit on occasion. But my foster mother worked as a domestic, and she interested the people for whom she worked in me. You know, she thought I was talented enough. And a couple of my piano teachers were as a result of her, you know, going to bat for me and advocating for me and thinking that I had a talent that should be developed. So I owe her all the credit. So, as I said, I grew up in Harlem, and I was born in Poughkeepsie, yes.
So if you could describe growing up what a typical day in the life of a young Frank Owens was like, what would you say?
Well, I played with my friends. You know, we would play different games. Stickball would be among them. Was it Engine number 9 running down Chicago line? Can you tell me the correct time? You know, we had games like that. Hide and seek, of course, that sort of thing. Loadies. I don't think anybody would remember that but me, in which we had bottle caps from either soda bottles or from whiskey bottles, and we would fill them with peelings from oranges and lemons and use them. We would draw something on the street and like a square, and it was kind of like marbles, but it was called Loadies, you know. And then we had Ring-a-Levia. So we had games like that growing up in Harlem, and I played stickball. And I loved being there. In fact, I went to Music and Art High School in my early years, and I got in on, you know, I guess as a musician. Music and Art was a great school for me because you know, they were very talented people there, and without regard for race or anything of the sort, they were just interested in artistic pursuits. So that would be a great, you know, probably growing up in Harlem, yes, we're going to Music and Art High School. I went to junior high school, of course, also, and I was bullied. You know, they stole my Captain Midnight ring, and, you know, things like that happened. You know, bullying happens, of course, today as well, so it's just unfortunate that it does happen like that. But I guess a day in Harlem was like if I didn't, during the summertime, we played stickball and things of that sort. And we also had roller skates, and the best kinds of skates were called Chicago skates. Chicago's, they were called. They were freewheeling, ball-bearing skates, and we would skate. I also had a bicycle. In those days, getting a 10-speed bike was quite something, but I did buy one. I earned enough money to buy one, and I used to ride. My friend and I, Russell Morgan, we would ride from New York to Queens. I don't know how we did it. We rode on the Grand Central Parkway, and we rode to Queens and Jamaica and things like that. I don't know how we did it. We rode across the 59th Street Bridge in Manhattan, the Queensboro Bridge. So we did a lot of things like that of course, we wouldn't be able to do today. So growing up in Harlem was kind of special. There were gangs, of course, too. I think the street on which I lived, the gangs that was named the Bachelors. So they had gang wars, and they made, I think, some kind of guns and things like that. So, but it wasn't as deep a crime thing as it is now. You know, people get killed. I don't know if we got killed then. So, but that was typical Harlem for me, you might say.
And what about the music that you liked as a young person? Tell us about the...
Well, my foster mother liked and lived and listened to classical music, so that's what I did. I listened to classical music, and that was my interest, you know. I didn't know anything about pop music. I think I knew about Jose Iturbi, who was a very popular pianist in films, and I knew about Andre Kostelanetz. He was a conductor. In fact, he was married to Lily Pons, I believe. And I would stand in front of the mirror and pretend to be a conductor and all that sort of thing. So I grew up wanting to be a classical pianist of European music, of course. And then my friend, Johnny Durrell, who lived in the house next to me, I lived at 2 West, he lived at 4 West, went to his house one day, and he had, we had records in those days. I didn't have a record player, and he played me Earl Garner. I Cover the Waterfront, and from then I was smitten, and I listened to Earl Garner, and I went back to my house to try to replicate what I had heard. Earl Garner played in a lot of flat keys, like B flat, D flat, A flat, that sort of thing. But I thought it was the key of D like David, so I played I Cover the Waterfront in D, not realizing that my piano was a half a tone flat, But listening to Earl Garner got me started in my foray into popular music, or jazz, you might say. And so that's how I got interested in music. And then I went on the Apollo Amateur Show, and as a pianist, and I played like an Earl Garner selection, I forget what it was called, and I won first prize for 2 weeks. And then after the second week, I said, well, I can play another song. I want people to know I can play another song. And I played Why Do I Love You from Showboat. And, of course, nobody had heard of Showboat necessarily. The audience wasn't tuned into that. And I only got third prize. And then from then on, I would hang out in the basement where they would do the auditions for the amateur show. And I would be a real brat. And, the pianist would be playing. And I'd say, no, that's the wrong key. It should be B, it should be this, blah, 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 blah. And one of them said to me, look, you can have this job after a while. And so I did. So I used to play for the Wednesday night amateur show, and that started me on my career. Among the performers that was on the show, the amateurs, was Barbara McNair. And we got to be an item for about 6 months or so, my first love affair. So then from then on, I guess my name spread around, and I got called for gigs, and we had a little band, and we would play dances and things of that sort. So am I rambling on too much? Probably.
Not at all. Not at all, no. I appreciate it. Tell us about Earl Garner's influence. It's something, that love for his work has never left you. No, it has not. So I've done several Earl Garner concerts, the last of which was, I think it was 2007 at the down at Tribeca, which is a college on Chambers Street in Lower Manhattan. That was my last concert I did of Earl Garner's music, remembering or celebrating Earl Garner. And then, as I listened to him, I absorbed his style. And so I have another concert coming up next year at Aaron Davis Hall, which is very close to City College, and I'm going to be doing another Earl Garner concert. He was a great influence on me. And I learned lots of material, lots of songs. I learned how to play popular music and jazz, etc. When I was growing up, I didn't know much about jazz, I knew about George Shearing, and I knew about, I didn't know much about Art Tatum either. I knew so little about popular music, and as I probably should have, learned how to play or learned how to listen to the people of that sort. Art Tatum was the master, of course. So in intervening years, of course, I've absorbed lots of styles, and I play jazz and popular music. But down here in Washington, I play for the ballet classes. I get a chance to exploit my classical playing, and I do that. But classical music is my first love. But Earl Garner was a great influence, and I guess in my music, you can always find influences of Earl Garner. What is it you like about your chosen instrument, the piano? Well, I think it's the easiest instrument to play. I tell anybody that. I don't teach piano because I don't think I would have the patience to do so. But it's the easiest instrument to play because the notes are already formed. Most people think that how can your hands can be independent of one another, but, they can be once you learn how to play. I learned how to play by ear, and it's helped me a lot because I can play certain symphonic excerpts, and I use them in my ballet classes as well, and that's been my influence. But it's my, I guess music you could say would be my first love in a way, and classical music is that. And I get to do some concerts, some jazz improvisation as well. I play an open mic every Friday up in New York. I go back and forth from here in Washington to New York, and I play an open mic, which is sponsored by Commute. She's a producer of an entrepreneur of jazz, etc. She's helped many people, and I do that. I play for singers and tap dancers and instrumentalists and all of that. Most of my career has been with singers, and the first of which was Johnny Mathis, as you mentioned. But I played for Johnny Mathis, I played for John Denver, and recorded with John Denver,
Chubby Checker, Johnny Nash, Melba Moore, Freda Payne, Petula Clark, of course, Andrew Canay, Keith David, Connie Francis. You know, it's a list of people, a very diverse array of singers that I've accompanied and worked with, and I guess I accompany quite well, if I say so myself. So.
That's what a lot of people have said about you, is that you're a wonderful accompanist.
Oh, I'm glad they said that.
So, of all of those singers, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here. Was there one that, to you, was just the absolute, just most consummate singer? Just the, wow, it's such an honor to be playing piano with them.
Well, that's a good question. I guess you could say Lena Horne would be among the choices. She was quite special. You know, when I was much younger, and I listened to, there's an album of Lena Horne at the Waldorf with Nat Brandywine and the orchestra. Nat Brandywine incidentally moved to Vegas, and he had the orchestra at Caesar's Palace, which I played there many times as well, mostly with Petula Clark. But Lena, I never thought I would be, you know, playing for a person such as Lena Horne. And it so happened that I was called to do so. She had a show on Broadway called The Lady and Her Music, and I didn't play that show, but they had heard of me. Harold Wheeler, who was a well-known and a consummate artist and pianist, musical director, he was one time was in charge of Dancing with the Stars, that sort of thing. So they had called him, and they had asked about me, and he said to them, "Oh, you'll never get Frank. He's too busy." How dare he? In any case, I did get called to do Lena, and that was quite special for me. So I would say she was the consummate artist, you know. She was special. She herself didn't think much of herself, you know. She said if she ever came back in life, she wanted to be Tina Turner, that sort of thing. I would also say that Petula Clark was a consummate artist, you know. She was so professional. I was with her for at least 10, 12 years or so. And I also give kudos to Freda Payne, who is not well known in a lot of circles. They think of her as a rhythm and blues singer because she had a big hit with Bring the Boys Home. But she grew up listening to jazz singers, Sarah Vaughan and Ella Fitzgerald, that sort of thing. And so in fact, I'm going to be performing with her in January, coming up next month in New Jersey, Hackensack. Not Hackensack, Hackettstown. But I play for her occasionally, too. So I say those are the three singers for whom I guess you could call the highlights of my life. I did a concert with Petula Clark at Albert Hall, and that was one of the highlights of my life. In fact, they're going to release a CD of that particular performance, you know. I also got to give kudos to John Denver, you know, because I've done lots of things with him as well, and, you know, he was such a gentle guy and such a generous guy, and we would do takes, and he would say, does everybody like that take? And if any of us didn't like it, we would do the whole thing over, you know. He wanted to please the musicians, and so it's kind of hard to narrow it down to one particular choice, you know. So, but I've been fortunate to work with the people I've worked with. Chubby Checker, of course, who was quite at the time, you know, with the twist and all that sort of stuff. So he's a little bit peeved at the fact that he hasn't been recognized in the Hall of Fame, you know, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because of that particular twist, you know, of the twist, which was written by Hank Ballard. You know, he got lots of acclaim, and that was a big record. Also, if I may say about big records, I think I did Tie a Yellow Ribbon for Tony Orlando and Dawn, and I came up with a particular figure that identifies the song, and as a result of my innovation, he got a show out of it. It was one of the biggest songs all over the world, you know, so it's just hard to narrow things down. So you put me on the spot, but I'm shutting up.
Well, the thing that sticks out in my mind there with that list is just the incredible diversity from Chubby Checker to Johnny Mathis to Lena Horne to, you know, all of these. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Johnny Mathis. He's been in the news a bit lately because he's releasing this, I don't know if I've ever heard of a box set with 66 discs.
That's right. That is correct, yes. Well, I was with Johnny when I auditioned for him. We were at Steinway Hall, which is on 57th Street in New York, and I was called to audition. Klaus Ogerman, a well-known arranger, he's no longer with us, but he said that Johnny was looking for a conductor, a pianist. So I auditioned in a studio there at Steinway Hall on 57th Street. Ahead of me was Linton Garner, who happens to be Errol Garner's brother. And he auditioned, and then I auditioned, and Johnny chose me. I would imagine because of the fact that we were close in age, or maybe because he liked my playing. I didn't know very much about anything, and I didn't know how to arrange. I didn't know how to give a downbeat. I didn't know anything about conducting, but he took me on the road with him. And when we got to Vegas, he had me learn conducting lessons from a conductor there named Antonio Morelli, who was the conductor of the Sands Orchestra. This is back in 57, 58, around there. So I got to give him credit for doing that, you know. So he had a voice, of course. In New York, there was a Colony Records store, and he would play certain records of the time that were trending, and he would hear "Chances Are" or "But Not for Me," "It's Not for Me to Say," and things like that. So Johnny was the first of the many singers that I've worked for that I must give credit for helping me to gain a foothold in learning how to conduct and and how to arrange, et cetera, et cetera. So from Johnny Mathis came others, but I give him credit for that. In fact, I saw him last year in Washington here, or I should say Bethesda. He was at Strathmore Music Center, and I went backstage and left a note, and he announced me from the audience. You know, he was so thrilled because we hadn't seen each other in years, you know, and it was kind of nice. So it was a wonderful meeting, and when I went backstage and saw him, and we hugged and talked and reminisced about the things that I've done and that he's done and all that. So I'm very special. That was a special moment, and he was a special performer for me, and he's still doing it all the time. He's got the voice that people like to hear, so he's constant. He's not a one-hit wonder. So,
how would you describe his personality?
At the time when I was working with him, he was kind of modest, you know. He didn't like to necessarily give autographs, and so John Noga was the manager. He and Helen Noga were his managers, and they would sometimes sign autographs for him on his behalf. He was kind of, how shall I say, he didn't move a lot on stage, and he was kind of shy, and he didn't really like to be, he wasn't animated as he is now. He's much more confident now. He's got that boyish charm. He still has that. And he's just, people love his voice, and he's learned to appreciate audiences, and he will now sign autographs as well. But at the time, he didn't hardly move. I can tell you a little story about him. When we were at Vegas back in those years, he would sing, say, "Chances Are," or "It's Not for Me to Say," and he would hold his hands. He has a way of holding the mic in front of him and clasping the mic with his hands. And the person in the light booth would remind Johnny, he said, "Johnny, you know, you have a makeup on your face, but your hands don't have the same color." So at the time, he did not know that, but it was a great tip, you know, so he did learn that. But he was kind of shy, and not anymore. He's much more motivated, he's much more animated, has much more confidence in himself, and he's been doing it for such a long time. So I would say that from the time that he was shy and not moving a lot, he moves on stage, and he's got a diverse array of material that he sings, Latin, everything. So he's a wonder.
Did you do any recording with Bob Dylan at one point?
Yes, I did. Highway 60, yeah, I'm the one that did that. Highway 61, I think it is, it's called, yes. And I don't know that I'm on the final takes. I know that a guy named, not Bob Johnson, took over from Tom something or other, was the producer originally. And I was called to do that particular session, along with some other musicians, Paul Griffin, for instance, and I think Joe Mack was on bass, so Joe Mack, I think he called himself Joe Mack. Al Cooper got in on a fluke. I don't know how that happened, you know, but he wasn't supposed to be on the session, but he must have come to the studio, and they put him on the session. I can't think of the producer's name. It might say Tom something or other. I can't think of his last name. But yeah, we did it in the 60s someplace at A&R Studio on 7th Avenue. And there were several sessions, but I was on at least one of them. So I think I'm on Highway 61 or like a Rolling Stone or one of those things like that, you know. So that's me. Yes, I did do that.
How did you come to work with Bob Dylan?
I was called, you know, in those years we would do sessions, you know, jingles and things of that sort. And I got a call from the, I guess it was the contractor, or Tom, I wish I could remember his name, but he was one of the first producers of the Bob Dylan set of, you know, of tunes. And I got a call to come and play. I'd never played for a folk artist before, and it was kind of nice to get a call. And that's what happened, you know. I pride myself on the fact that I could play all types of music, although I envied Paul Griffin and Richard T. Those guys were into R&B a lot. In fact, I did an album called Brown and Serve, which is not a great album, but it was mostly R&B tunes that I did. So, but that's how I got the call to do that. So that was how it was. I think the contractor, it wasn't Tom that called me. It could have been, but I got the call to do it at A&R Recording Studios on 7th Avenue between 51st and 52nd Streets. So that's what happened with that, yeah.
Did you meet Bob Dylan at all?
Kind of, yeah. We just sort of shook hands, I guess. I didn't really get to know him that well. But I do remember in the studio, I was at the piano. I think Paul Griffin was on organ or so. And we had what they called gobos, G-O-B-O. And there was barriers set up so that the sounds of our instruments won't leak into the other sounds. And, the guitars, etc. And between every take, I could remember Bob Dylan writing the next verse to the song he was going to sing. I think it was Like a Rolling Stone. So he had a piece of paper, and he would jot down the lyrics of what he was getting ready to do next. So it was pretty much a work in progress. But that's the closest I've ever been to him. So, just, as I said, just a casual acquaintance, didn't really get to know him very well at all.
I'm hoping you can tell us about the David Letterman Symphony Orchestra.
I'm glad you asked about that, yeah. This was 1980, and he was looking for a musical director, so I went to wherever the studio was, and I auditioned. Chuck Stewart, or I think his name was that, he was the one who produced the $20,000 Pyramid, Dick Clark. And he saw me, and would you believe I didn't have to play a note? He said to me, look, I don't care if you know anything past Deep Purple, you've got the job. And I got the job. I had never met Dave Letterman and all that sort of thing, and never done a television show at all at that time. And I was in the studio with him, and that was it. So the next thing, I got to meet David Letterman, and they had a theme that was written by Michael McDonald. So we, as a musical director, had to learn the theme and replicate it because it wasn't written down. Michael McDonald, a lot of those guys, they don't write music out. They just create it, and that's it. So I transcribed it, and we used it to play on the morning show. So that's what happened with that show. At the time, I think about it now, it was quite something to think about me as a person of color having an orchestra, or I should say, not an orchestra, it was just a quartet. But, David was really zany, and because, I guess, of his zaniness, if there's such a word, he was on in the morning, but maybe it was too early for people to appreciate the kind of humor that he had. But we lasted for about 3 months or so, and it was on from 10 to 11:30, and then they cut it down from 10 to 11, And then after that, we were replaced by Card Sharks, and it was Wink Martindale was the person the host of that particular show. So we were replaced by that. But I had a good run out of it. It was great for 3 months. We were on television. We went to, I think, some town in Moscow, Idaho, or someplace like that, Iowa, and because David was zany, and people would write in a contest, and they say they want to have the show hosted from their city or their town or their house, and that's what happened. So we did that. I think Cloris Leachman was from that area, so I think she was on the show, but that's what we did. But every morning it was on from 10 to 11 to 11:30. My drummer, Frank Derrick, we had a quartet, and Jay Lenhart, very well-known bassist, and Frank Derrick, the drummer, and Bob Rose, guitarist, and I used them for my quartet, my band. I didn't realize it until Frank Derrick came over to me one day, and he said, did you realize that you're the only person of color that has a TV show? Never thought about it before, because Billy Taylor had the David Frost show. So I just hadn't thought about it. I didn't realize how fortunate I was, and how that I was one of a kind at the time, and I got the job without even auditioning. But there's some nice moments in that. In fact, there's on YouTube, there's a thing called Face Off, David Letterman, and I got a chance to play a solo and stuff like that. Evita, as a matter of fact, Don't Cry for Me, Argentina, from Evita, I did that. So anybody listening can look it up. Frank Owens, Face Off, David Letterman. So that was a great experience for me.
What do you think of David Letterman?
Well, I think that he's an innovator, and in fact, at the time, he certainly was, I enjoyed him a lot. And I wish I had been more personable, as Paul Schaefer is at the moment. He's a personality. But I remember one time David Letterman asked me, is there anything you want to tell your lady at home or something like that? And I should have thought of something cute, like I didn't put the lock on, or, I didn't think about that sort of thing. So I wasn't really a personality. But I was just there as a musician, and I played for many singers, of course, and some of whom I knew. Irene Cara came on the show because she was busy with Fame. It was 1980. And I think Benny King and different groups came on the show, and some of whom I knew. So David was quite nice to me, and I enjoy him, and I learned a lot about the kind of music that he likes. And there was a gentleman named Stu Smiley. He's gotten up in the world, but he would be like I want to say flunky, but he would come up to me and tell me what David might want to hear or that sort of thing. Because we had to do music during the commercials, when we were off the air. So there were certain tunes that David wanted to hear, that sort of thing. But I enjoyed David a lot, and it was good. I was very pleased to have been a part of it,
With all the things you've done, and there's a lot of things, you've had the chance to accompany some really incredible singers. Mm-hmm. You've recorded, conducted, all of these different things that you've done. Are there any dreams of yours that you're hoping to fulfill that you haven't yet?
Yeah, you might say that there is one. I've been so lazy. I'm a real procrastinator, but I want to write an orchestral suite about children's themes. Now, of course, the classical musicians in the past years will write children's suites and things like that, but I would want to write the suite about the things growing up in Harlem, for piano and orchestra, and with a soprano. My foster mother would call me out the window because I couldn't play past a certain time. She was pretty strict, and I had to be in the house by a certain time. And she would yell out, Frank, and all my friends down the block was, hey, Frank, your mother's calling you, and I'd have to be in. But I would want to write a suite about that, for orchestra, with boys' choir, that sort of thing, with like the Harlem Boys' Choir, or some place where they would have a boys' choir, like Atlanta or whatever, and doing the games that we used to play, Ringo Levio and 5, 10, 15, 20, that sort of thing, and have a soprano voice to replicate my mother's calling me, my foster mother actually, calling me out the window. So I would like to write a children's suite. That's what I'd like to do, and I've been thinking about it for quite some time. That would be one of my dreams to do, but I'm too lazy to do it at the moment. But that's what I'd love to do, yes.
As you were mentioning earlier in the interview, it seems like you kind of have this commuter kind of experience right now, back and forth from, you said, Washington and New York?
That's right, exactly it, yes. I don't want to ever travel again. I've traveled all over the world, with Petula Clark and with Johnny Mathis, with Australia and all that sort of stuff, and even with Chubby Checker, South America, that sort of thing. But I don't want to travel anymore, but I do go back and forth on the bus, yes. I'll give Vamoose credit. I use Vamoose bus lines to go back and forth to New York. I go back and forth from Bethesda to New York. I come up to New York. I do sometimes I coach a particular singer on Friday afternoon. I take a bus at 10 something in the morning and get in at New York in mid-afternoon. And then from the singer that I coach, sometimes I go to do the open mic, sponsored by Kobe Narita. And then on Saturday, I'm in New York just for most of the day, and then I come back to to Washington, because I have ballet classes starting at 9:30 on Sunday morning. So that's what I've been doing. Now, I don't have to do this for the next couple of weeks because we will not have an open mic because it's Christmas and because of New Year's. So I can stay down here in Washington. I don't have to travel. It gets to be kind of wearisome, but I enjoy doing the open mic. I play for singers. They like the way I accompany them and play for them. So tap dancers, etc. So I do that a lot. I enjoy that a lot. It gets to be quite a trek, but it is. Yes, that's my commutation in these days. I do have to come to New York on this coming Tuesday to play tomorrow, to play a private party at a restaurant, a Christmas party. So I will be in New York for that. But other than that, I will be mostly down here. So when I was very young, my foster mother, we would travel to a city called Branchville, Virginia. Ever since then, I always wanted to live in Washington. So I decided to do that, and I had a house in Long Island, and I sold that, and I moved down here. So I've been down here since about 2001 or 2. I'm enjoying it a lot in Washington. I don't like the traffic situation, nor do I like the way the traffic lights, they're too long. But I mean, I'm convinced about that, But I enjoy being here. I do. I really do.
So you would say Washington, D.C. has become your home?
For the most part, yes. But I would always think New York is still my base, because I have a P.O. box there. I have 2 apartments in New York, one of which I hardly have ever had. But I do enjoy my living. I enjoy how I live. I enjoy how I've been able to achieve what I've been able to achieve, and I've been very fortunate. So I must say music has been very good to me, and I've been fortunate that people have, I guess, liked what I've played, and enough so that I can be hired for the things that I do, especially the ballet classes and the sessions that I've done too. And I've worked with every singer, including Streisand. I mean, I've worked with, recorded with, and I've played for Connie Francis. I really have a blessed life, I must say. I'm very fortunate.
Well, on the recording side of things, of the recordings that you've been a part of, has there been a particularly stellar recording that you made?
Aside from, the Tyola Ribbon, that was one of the big things in my life, I guess, I'm on a Lena Horne album, a couple of them, as a matter of fact. I have my own album also. I did the music of Eddie Hayward. Eddie Hayward was a pianist back in the 90s, etc., particularly, and one of his main one of his main hits was the Canadian Sunset. So there was a gentleman named Earl Williams who produced an album of Eddie Hayward's music, and I played all of his selections, So that's when you can get that, Eddie Hayward. Frank Owens plays the music of Eddie Hayward. My first album was Oliver Ole. Jimmy Wisner is a producer who lives in Jersey, and he came up with the idea of doing the music of Oliver, Lionel Bart score, in a Latin vein. So that happened in 1969. It was released in 1969. I did my own album of Brown and Serve, which was an R&B album, as I said before. It's not a great album, in my opinion, but there's some nice things on it. One, of course, is Ben, the Michael Jackson tune, and I did that with strings and etc. So, but I did some other things. I did Aretha Franklin. So anyway, I won't try to tout that album, but it's called Brown and Serve, and it's on the internet, I guess. I won't get a penny from it. It was produced by Bernard Purdy, well-known drummer, and the label was called Encounter Records, and it was Lloyd Price and Bernard Purdy. Lloyd Price, of course, his fame of personality. So I'm not proud of that album, but it's around in case anybody wants to buy it on the internet. So it was a 12-inch album. So, but I've done it, and but I'm getting ready to redo Oliver because I want to do a couple of things over. My jazz playing at the time wasn't all that well done, in my opinion, so I've redone it, and I edited it, and I just haven't put it out yet. So it's going to be called now, Frank Owens Plays the Music of Oliver with a Latin Twist. That's what I'm going to redo it as, But Jimmy Wisner had the right. It was nice that he thought about doing it in a Latin vein. So I'd like to get that underway. I just haven't done so yet. Big procrastinator that I am.
So I understand that you did some work at the Apollo. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I did. As I mentioned before, I was an amateur myself years ago, and I won first prize for a couple of times. Anyway, bottom line is, later on, in later years, they were doing a show called Showtime at the Apollo. And Melba Moore, they asked her, and she said, I don't know who you're going to get for the musical director, but you should really get Frank Owens. And that was a nice plug. And I worked with Melba, so that's how I got the job. And it was quite nice. I enjoyed it for about 7 years until it was taken over by Ray Chu, who, of course, went on to do, I think, one of those talent shows like Dancing with the Stars or something like that. But that was a good thing for me, and I was kind of famous at the time, yeah. So every week they would say, Frank Owens and the band, and that was exposure every week. It was for 7 years, so I really enjoyed that a lot. I forgot to mention that.
What is the best thing about being Frank Owens?
Oh, I don't know. I've been fortunate. I've had a nice life. I've had many liaisons with ladies and things of that sort. I've been fortunate that I've been able, my health has been pretty good, you know. I'm not happy about the fact that I've lost some hair. And I always say that I used to be cute. In fact, if I die, if and when I die, I want the tombstone to say, I used to be cute. That's what I'd like it to say. When I think that W.C. Fields died, I think the tombstone says, I'd rather be here than Philadelphia. He hated Philadelphia, you know. So I guess the people that I have, the friends that I have, and that sort of thing, and I guess I'm different from a lot of other pianists. You know, I don't consider myself a jazz pianist, so I like the fact that the things that I do are appreciated by many, so, and that I'm able to do all different types of music. So I guess that's one of the best things about being Frank Owens, and I have a nice life, and there's a lady in my life, and so I'm fortunate. I guess I'm lucky. I'm fortunate. I'm blessed. I am.
How would you define Frank Owens?
Oh, I don't know how. You'd have to ask somebody else about me, you know. But I think I'm friendly and warm and friendly and giving and generous, etc. I do lots of photographs. I've done many photographs of different celebrities, you know, and I have had a photo exhibit. I have. So there are many things that I'm multifaceted, I suppose, and people might say of me that I hope that they don't think that I'm selfish and egotistical. I don't think so. I'm modest, and people said that Virgoans don't really know how to accept compliments and things of that sort, so that could possibly be it. But I'm very particular about the things that I may do, and if I make a mistake, I'm the one that hears it, and other people don't, and I want to do it over, especially in a recording session, so I'm very particular about that. I don't want anything to be out there that is not of my sanction, you know. I want my performances to be perfect if possible. People say you can't play perfectly, but I think you can. I aspire to play better classical music. I hear people that play well and that sort of thing. You got the people such as Andre Watts and Murray Pariah and those kinds of people, and I listen to classical music when I'm here in Washington for the most part, so they play flawlessly, and I'd like to get to that level. But I play some things myself, and I'm fortunate that I can play what I play. I play a lot better than I used to, of course, you know, so I guess I just hope that people think of me as a nice guy. I guess I think I could say that.
Well, you are a nice guy, and you do have a humbleness to you. You're very talented, but also you're humble and down to earth. And I didn't know you were a fellow Virgoan.
Yes, I am. September 1st. As a matter of fact, every year, every summer, from May through the latter part of September, they have a Piano in the Park series at Bryant Park. That's the big park behind the public library in New York, you know, behind the big public library. And every week they have a different pianist. And they have Dick Hyman, people of that sort, John Weber, Roy Eaton, many different pianists they have there. And I usually play the last week of August or the first week of September. So I do that every year. So I do enjoy doing that. I think you can find it on YouTube or on the internet or so. And sometimes I make mistakes, and I hate when people, I hate when people hear them, if they do, you know, but people don't necessarily, but I want to be I'm the arbiter of trying to play perfectly, you know. But I play for a variety of people. People come into the park, they have their lunch there, and I've been told that I draw the most people there, so I'm fortunate, and I feel good about that, you know, that people like my playing, so that's one of the things that I do yearly, every year, so.
I'm going to leave the interview this way, open-ended. For anyone who's listening in, wherever they might be, what would you say to anyone who's tuned in?
You ask quite some interesting, pertinent questions, Paul. I would say, well, it would be nice if the people who do hear me get to hear me in person or by means of recordings or that sort of thing, you know. I'm thrilled myself when I hear things that I've done on the radio, you know. I produced a singer down here, Chad Carter, and I produced his album, and it was there's a station down here that plays jazz music and, of course, the American Songbook, and one day they decided to play a tune that I had done with him, you know. I've grown accustomed to his face, so I'm thrilled when I hear my music, you know. I did a commercial once years ago. There was a recording studio on the East 62nd Street, and they came in and they said that they wanted a sort of a Bobby Short feel. Bobby Short, of course, the well-known entertainer that worked at the Carlisle for years. And I said, okay, how come you didn't get Bobby Short? Well, we can't get Bobby Short because he's too expensive. And they asked me to sing a song, and I sang a commercial. It was Tribunal Vermouth. And one day I was driving in my car, and I heard it. It was around Christmas time, and I wanted to tell somebody, but I couldn't tell anybody because I was by myself. So that's the only time I've done a singing commercial, but I was proud of that. It is called Vermouth. It's a Vermouth, Tribunal Vermouth, and I guess I didn't sound too bad at all, you know. So, but I've been fortunate that I've done some very classy jingles. I worked for a woman named Louise Messina, who produced a lot of jingles, and she hired me, just got out of the blue. She decided to use me, and I did lots of jingles for cars, you know, Buick, Chrysler, Buick Opel, all kinds of commercials, and I did a lot of jingles in those years. So, as a matter of fact, there's a note of, there was a guitar player I wanted to hire named Jack Cavari, and I wanted him for my David Letterman show, but he was busy doing jingles, and they didn't want to miss anything. But Bob Rose was equally gifted, so we were on it. So that was a highlight of my life, too. The highlight of my life, I would say, one of the things was playing for Lena Horne, of course, and also doing the Albert Hall concert with Petula Clark. Those are the highlights of my life, I suppose you could say.
Well, you have my curiosity up, because I've heard your piano playing, but maybe you'll sing us a line from a song that you like.
I don't know. Let me see. I happen to be by my piano, but I don't know what I could sing necessarily. The first, let me see. I can do this. First for the Tribunal of Vermouth, if I can remember the first. You like July in Juneau. I like something in Juneau. You grow for cream trees. I like breeze. But when it comes to our vermouth, we both agree. Tribunal's the one for you and me. I can't remember the lyric. That was a lot of years ago, you know, but I can't remember that, you know, that lyric at all. I wrote another song for Kobe Narita, but I can't think of all of the lyrics. I don't have. I wish you had prepared me. I would have gotten my lyrics in front of me. I would have been able to do that, you know. But it was a song that can't see a show. You're short on dough. Don't know where to go, but you're in the know to go midtown at Kobe's place. Yeah, but I don't remember anything like that. I could play a Bach selection, but I don't think you want to hear that. But anyway.
Well, I would.
Hey, all right. This is very short. It's a two-part invention by Bach.
Okay. Nice.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, Paul. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. I have to say, I've been doing this show for 14 years now, and this was an unprecedented show. I have never had a guest who played the piano on the air. That was great.
Oh, well, thank you, Paul. Thanks very much. I was surprised, and I was, I guess, a little bit at a stand. I didn't know. I said, well, why did this guy want to interview me, and who is he, and all that sort of stuff. But I'm pleased. If you're happy, then I'm happy, and I'm just flattered that you wanted to interview me. Thank you.
Well, thank you. My pleasure.